Now that we have our MIDI environment set up within Nuendo, we can begin making use of its extensive and powerful MIDI recording capabilities. Many of the features we have discussed about the various recording modes and all the transport recording functions are exactly the same when dealing with recording MIDI into Nuendo. This makes it very easy to work seamlessly between the two environments. If you know one, you'll know the other. In this tutorial, we'll cover the key functions you'll use when recording MIDI, as well as highlight the similarities and differences between audio and MIDI recording. MIDI recording is dealt with in four main areas of the user interface. First is the MIDI track and the track inspector, which is found in the project layout window, both which serve as a primary focus for MIDI track recording. You'll notice that in the inspector, there's a tab called Track Parameters, which gives you a wealth of powerful MIDI parameters to help customize how your MIDI tracks respond and play back. Functions such as transpose and velocity shift make it easy to make swift, broad changes to your entire MIDI track without having to get into the details of the MIDI editors. Second is the MIDI channel in the VST mixer. This provides a more console-centric access to the MIDI track parameters. Third, we have the transport, where the punch settings, metronome settings, tempo settings, pre- and post-roll, and recording modes all affect MIDI recording in the same way as audio. Activating MIDI record is the same as audio. You just hit the record button. The one additional function we have in the transport is the auto cue function. This activates auto quantizing on any live MIDI recording you do. The quantize value that you use during this auto quantizing is the one that is set in the project window grid value. Last, we have a very special mode for MIDI recording called step input mode. Many older hardware MIDI sequencers or drum machines have a step input mode that allow you to enter notes one step at a time onto a grid or track layout. This allowed you to freely create simple or intricate passages without the restrictions of recording in real time. With step input, you can put the notes exactly where you want and when you want without worrying about mistakes or having to stay in time with the metronome. We'll take a closer look at how this works shortly. Alright, now that we've got the location of all the functions down, let's see how these functions all work and go over some of the basics of MIDI recording. As I mentioned before, many of the recording functions in audio are the same when dealing with MIDI, so we'll just focus on the differences and mention a few of the similarities. Starting with the transport, everything works exactly the same, with the exception of two additional cycle recording modes. These are the mix and overwrite modes. If we arm our MIDI track and hit record in cycle mode, Nuendo will respond in one of two ways. First, in mix mode, Nuendo will mix the recorded events into the existing events during each loop cycle pass. Second, in overwrite mode, Nuendo will simply overwrite the existing events during each loop cycle pass. If we move over to the MIDI track and inspector in the project layout window, we'll find some distinctly different options and parameters for MIDI tracks versus audio tracks. First, we have the option to record in a stacked mode, as we saw earlier in the cycle and multi-lane recording tutorial. But now, we also have the option to choose a drum map mode for the MIDI track. This puts the MIDI track into a full-on drum mode. Anytime you record or edit MIDI on this track, drum mode specific options will be made available. One of them is the drum map editor. We'll cover this in more detail in the MIDI editors tutorial. If we move over to the inspector area, you'll see that we have several new options provided to us within the Track Parameters tab. This gives us access to some commonly used parameters when dealing with MIDI events. For instance, many times you may need to change the key scale of an entire arrangement. Normally, you would have to either open the editor and change all the note events or process some transpose command on the specific areas you need. But with the track parameters, you can transpose the entire track, affecting everything that is within the track lane. Other functions, such as the random tool, can be used to add small light nuances to various attributes of your MIDI notes, which can help add some organic flavor and feeling into your recordings that might otherwise have a very cold, sterile feel due to very rigid quantization. Now let's check out the step input recording. First, you simply create an empty MIDI track. This is done by using the Draw tool to draw in a MIDI event, as long or as short as you like. We'll make ours exactly 4 bars. Now, if you double-click on this event, you'll see a toolbar at the top with some options. To the far right, you'll see this button, which is used to activate the step input mode. By activating this, Nuendo essentially bypasses all real-time recording through the transport and allows you to enter the notes one step at a time with your MIDI controller. The step values used are the same as a quantized grid value. Our grid value is currently set at 1/16, so the cursor will move every 1/16 of a step. You'll notice that as I press a key on my keyboard, a note is entered and the cursor advances to the next step. If you need to move forward or backward, you can use the arrow keys on your computer keyboard to move the recording cursor around as needed. If you haven't noticed already, this is a very powerful tool when you need to create very intricate or detailed percussion lines or keyboard riffs, but you still want to maintain some sort of hands-on control over which notes you are actually entering through your musical keyboard controller. A perfect example is entering in 16th note staccato synth lines or a 16th note hi-hat line for your drum tracks. Now that we've gained all this great knowledge of MIDI recording, let's actually use it on a song. I've got a project here that already has some keyboard lines recorded. But I need to add a nice bass line, and also some more percussive hi-hat lines to the drum part. I've already got 2 new MIDI tracks ready and set up for these parts. One of them is controlling the G-Media Oddity Analog Virtual Synthesizer plugin to give me a nice juicy fat bass sound. And the second track is set up to control Native Instruments Battery plugin with a nice electronic drum kit already loaded up. First, we'll arm the bass track and make sure we have a signal. We'll record that first, and off we go. Perfect. Now let's get our percussion hi-hat line. I'll unarm the synth track and arm the battery track. Make sure I have a signal, reset my playback cursor, but this time I know that I want a straightforward 16th note hi-hat line, so let's use the step input mode instead. First I'll call up the Draw tool, then I'll draw out a 4-bar event, and then go into the editor and activate the step input mode, and begin entering notes with my keyboard controller. As I play the keys on my keyboard, Nuendo will enter in a note and advance to the next step until we are done. Okay, let's check it out now. Great. Exactly what I was looking for. So, as you can see, MIDI recording in most ways is exactly the same as audio recording. Many of the same functions such as your recording modes, track arming, input routing, punch-in settings, and more all function the same as in audio recording. However, we also saw that MIDI recording offers several advanced functions such as the drum mat mode, the step input mode, and the inspector settings, all of which offer very powerful and flexible means of working with your MIDI recordings. Now that you've learned the methods for recording both audio and MIDI into Nuendo, the time comes when you will want to edit the material to either correct mistakes or to enhance or change certain aspects of your recording. And editing happens to be one of the most powerful areas in Nuendo. We'll learn all about this in the next topic called editing.